Hello once again, welcome back to the shop. This is part 2 of a multi-part video on building a cast iron vise similar to this one. I've already made part 1, which is tips 870. I hope you have watched that, and in that rather long video I took the rough castings made by Clark Easterling down in Mississippi, Windy Hill Foundry, and I machined these surfaces clean and true and smooth, and that's pretty much all that got done in the first video, but it was kind of an interesting job setting it up in a 4-jaw chuck and machining off that fire scale and all that. But let's begin now today's lesson on drilling the 2 holes for the screw and the guide bar. Remember, this was a school project when I was a teacher many years ago, and I think I first came up with this project about 1970, and we did make hundreds of them made out of aluminum. I still have most of the dimensions in my head. There never was a blueprint. Remember that these were beginning kids in a metals class. They were not machine shop students. Some of them could not do math, they couldn't read, and they certainly didn't know what a blueprint or a drawing was yet. They hadn't had drafting, so I had done many things to make this what I think fairly foolproof, which is never real easy to do. And you know why? It's because fools are so ingenious. The original vise from which I made the patterns at the high school in order to cast this up was made by Stanley Tools. So I guess that in some ways I copied that. Not in some ways, I did copy it, but we never sold these, so I didn't break any laws. Remember that my friend up in Wisconsin, Ted, made the patterns for me, the blue patterns. I no longer have them here. They were sent up recently to Minnesota, where they're going to use them in a foundry project they're doing up there. But anyway, taking a look at this original made in my class probably in the 80s. See the hole right here and right here, a 3/16 hole? Do you know what the purpose of that is? Of course you don't. And you might thinking it's to hold woodworking faces in here, pieces of wood, like many wood vices have. By the way, I'm sometimes called Vice Man. I'm sorry I'm showing you so many vices and I have so many vice projects, but vice projects are just the perfect vehicle for teaching people, students, and full-grown adults many machine shop operations. But anyway, the purpose of those holes was to screw the 2 together while these 2 holes are drilled so that there is perfect alignment. That's part of my foolproof business. So I've already laid out, see the little white dot right here and the little white dot right here? I will center punch those, and I'm going to drill 3/16 all the way through. I'll do that on the drill press off camera, and then I will temporarily screw them together, and I'm using cap screws so that I can't shear them off. I would like larger holes like 1/4, but I really don't want that in the finished project. You will see by the looks of this hole here, it's elongated, that I did have the kids put C-clamps on here like that and then use a hand drill to drill those. And when you're using a hand drill, you always get that crazy business. So I'll do that on the drill press, and I'll be back momentarily. Well, I thought I'd better show you this before I do the drilling, but I've got them C-clamped together with small C-clamps like that. And again, I will go to the drill press and drill those little white holes through both pieces before I take the clamps off. Notice that this edge here is flush as this is. Ready to drill. Okay, the holes have been drilled and the cap screws tightened down, and those are temporary. And I just put a little bit of dye on there. I know the line doesn't show up very well, but I made a center line on there. And now I will lay out, I believe it's 1/2 inch up from the bottom for the center of this hole, and 5/8 from this point to the center of this hole. Now I want to tell you that, again, there's no blueprints for this, so I had on the patterns made impressions, that is center punch impressions, so that the kids, I would just tell them, drill that hole 1/2 inch or drill that one, whatever it was, 5/8 I think it is. So in other words, they were pre-center punched to try to make it foolproof so that everyone could succeed. Not to prevent them from learning how to measure and lay out, but remember, these are beginners. The layout is complete. This hole will be drilled 1/2 inch all the way through. Probably could be reamed, but I think we'll just drill it because we don't want too tight of a fit. I don't know why I'm telling you this, because no one will be making this because there are no patterns available, and this is just show and tell here. You're not going to be able to make this. But this hole, already center punched, will be drilled 17-30 seconds because it is going to be tapped 5/8 11 on the bottom piece, the bottom casting anyway. This one will remain 1/2 inch all the way through. This one will be re-drilled in the top piece only. Do you understand that? I would mark the kids. I would take a magic marker or whatever, and I would mark the dimensions for kids. Sometimes on my castings I had stamped into the patterns what sizes they were to drill. I'm trying to make things, again, foolproof so they succeed and do not become discouraged and hate metalworking. Perhaps I'm telling you too much about what went on in the high school shop, but I had made a drill fixture for this to hold this so that they're going to drill this on a big drill press, you know, a very powerful Delta drill press, and I didn't want that to get away from them or spin around and break their wrist and hurt them and all of that. So I had a fixture. The bottom plate was thicker than this piece, but the work laid on there, and there were a couple of big threaded bolts here. Actually, I think it was threaded rod, and a bar that went across like this, and they could, in other words, they could tighten that down on both sides. This wouldn't go anywhere, and the bottom plate was larger than this, so that it in turn could be clamped on the drill press to prevent spinning. But of course, I'm not going to do it this way. I'm a machinist, so I will, I believe, put this into the Bridgeport, and I think this will fit into the 6-inch vise, but barely. Not think, I already checked. Here we are at the Bridgeport mill, and this is a 6-inch genuine Bridgeport vise, opened all the way, and believe me, that's all the extra space we have, so that's going to work just fine. And why is there a piece of oak sitting right here? You're right, so we don't drill into the vise. Tighten it down. I've got a starter drill here, and I will use that first. And then this hole at the bottom here will be 1/2 inch all the way through into the wood. And this hole will be 17-30 seconds all the way through both pieces and into the wood. Luckily, I have a 17-30 seconds with a step down. I must have done that years ago rather than a taper shank, so that'll be real convenient. Again, that's the tap drill size for 5/8 11 national course, unified national course. Okay, starter drill. Boy, that cast iron drills nicely. By the way, there's a 2-part video on how to make this push-button, quick-acting quill stop, so be sure and watch that. And now I will drill 1/4 inch all the way through both pieces and into the wood. How will I know when I'm deep enough? When I have wood chips. Or you could put a stop so you don't drill into the vise, but we got 3/4 of an inch to play with down here. So let's drill away. That's about almost 2.5 inches worth of drilling. And now 1/2 inch all the way through. think I'll slow it down. By the way, I've been using a wiggler to line up the spindle with the center punched holes, and the table is clamped in both directions, and on this top hole, which will be drilled 17/32 all the way through, I'm using always a starter drill. And now my 1/4" pilot all the way through. And now 17/32 all the way through. Okay, we're done here on the drill press. The top hole in the top piece here has to be re-drilled at 5/8 before I tap it 5/8 11, because I only want a thread, remember, in the bottom piece, correct? Alright, I'm going to take it out of the vise here. Now make darn sure that you're done before you remove your work from a chuck or a vise or whatever the fixture may be, because you'll never get it back in there the same. I mean never. I'm back at the bench now, and I've taken the little screws out, obviously. And there you can see the holes. Now we know those will all line up by my method here, don't we? Now laying this piece aside, because remember that this hole right here that my finger's in will be tapped 5/8 11. So I'll set that off to the side, always trying to remember what we're doing here and giving it a lot of thought so we don't spoil the castings. I only have one set of castings, but the top hole, this hole right here, is going to be drilled 5/8, and that's a clearance size for the 5/8 screw. The thread is in the back piece, the bottom piece. Alright, back to the milling machine. You know, I don't like to do this on the drill press because there's just no good way. You know, and that can get away from you with a large one. So back into the Bridgeport, this goes. Too many details? Alright, I'm ready to drill this hole 5/8 all the way through. Just this hole. Okay, we've got a 5/8 hole right here, but I'm still not done. So I will flip it over, and this hole will be counterbored like this. And I had special tooling for everything, so that will be counterbored because there's a retaining ring that has to go in here. And over the years I made changes to the patterns, and at one point rather than have them counterbore, because that was troublesome for them, I changed the pattern so that the counterbore was cast in there. That didn't work all that well either, because you can see that in this one the counterbore was cast, and then it was also at some point counterbored with a counterbore similar to this. I didn't have the ones at the school that had the replaceable pilot. So, what am I saying here? This is going to go back in, tighten it down, I'll tool up, and I'll go in, about 3/16 deep. Okay, I've set this wonderful quill stop for 3/16 deep. Remember, you do not need lubricants when you're cutting cast iron. However, I like to put a little bit of oil on the pilot. Boy, that wobbles, doesn't it? That's only wheels. Now, if you don't have a counterbore, you could just use a little end mill and make it rectangular, because this one is more or less rectangular. Well, I hope you're enjoying the video, and if you do, would you give me a thumbs up and subscribe and a few things like that? Because remember, I do not beg you for money or try to sell you vitamins or timeshares or any other craziness like that that a lot of people are doing now. So all I ask is that you support the channel in that way. Thank you. Many of these little techniques and improvements that I'm showing you, I arrived at over a period of time, over years, while observing various problems that the kids had and failures that they had. So now we got the counterbore, we got the 5/8 hole. This hole needs to be threaded 5/8 11. Again, always use a taper tap, 7 tapered teeth, as opposed to a plug which has 3 or 4. So this is the one we have to use. And guess what would happen if I turned the class loose and said, go ahead and tap the hole? Well, first of all, they're liable to tap the wrong hole, so I would typically take a magic marker and I would circle or I would mark and I would tell them what to do. But if you just stuck this in the vise, even I or you or someone that is semi-experienced would probably tap crooked just enough to cause a bind when you tried to put this thing together. So how do we get around that? I'm going to put this back together using the same little screws, and I'm going to tap through this hole. This is a clearance hole. That will act as a drill bushing and a tap guide to assure that I am tapping straight. Do you understand that? Okay, it's back together with the 2 little screws, and I took a piece of 1/2-inch rod just to double check that I have the proper alignment there, and I might even leave that in place, but I need to push it down a little bit, and it is kind of snug. Right there, and then I am ready with this beautiful Starrett tap wrench to tap the hole, and that assures that it is straight, doesn't it? And I will just put this in the bench vise and show you a little bit of what I'm doing there. The video is getting too long. They always are too long. Let's tap the hole and let's tap it straight, and let's use Starrett. Can you imagine a whole class full of 16-year-old or 15-year-old boys doing this? All right, the thread is complete. I took the screws out and I put a cap screw in here, a 5/8 cap screw, just to make sure everything's fitting up. I'm just testing it, and that lines up nicely. So I'm in good shape at this point, but that wasn't true with all of the students. Things would happen, and I just discovered now a trick that I showed the kids. So obviously this boy, 40 years ago, now he's probably dead of old age. Initials are MT. So he had a bind, evidently, because this hole has been drilled oversized, this hole right here. And that helped eliminate the bind. I didn't like the extra slop, but sometimes that's what you have to do. We don't want too close a tolerances that prevent this thing from actually being usable or operable. And to be honest with you, there were some that did not turn out. Well, this is the end of part 2. Be sure and watch part 3. In review, what I did here was to drill these 2 holes and thread them. So next time I will drill and tap a hole right here, and that'll be for the clamp screw. And I will start to make some of these parts. So be sure and tune in when that is available. Thank you for watching. This is Mr. Pete saying so long for now. Hello, Henry.